just do this. And this is kind of my way of forgetting my surroundings and kind of distracting myself and focusing on a central point so that I can kind of pick up on subtle impressions that come through.
A clip has been making the rounds online claiming that Tyler Henry, the psychic media behind Hollywood Medium, has finally opened up about the single most disturbing person he's ever sat across from during a reading. Someone from a session dating back to 2017 that he supposedly kept under wraps ever since. It's the kind of headline that grabs attention instantly. But before jumping to conclusions, it's worth slowing down and separating what's actually confirmed from what's speculation and what we simply don't know yet. Because the real story here might end up being far more interesting than the dramatic title suggests. Let's start with who Tyler Henry actually is. For anyone who isn't familiar, he's the personality behind Hollywood Medium, Life After Death with Tyler Henry, and more recently Live from the Other Side. Henry was born in January 1996, and according to his own account, he didn't realize he had any kind of ability until around age 10, when he says he had a premonition about his grandmother passing away. From there, he began doing informal readings for classmates and teachers throughout high school, reportedly charging around $40 a session, and he even led grief support sessions at a small local shop before he'd even graduated. His first big break came at just 19 years old, when he landed Hollywood Medium. From there, his career took off quickly. Over the years, he's read for a long list of celebrities, including Megan Fox, Jaleel White, several members of the Kardashian family, Snooki, Jodie Sweetin, and Lil' Kim, among many others. His Netflix specials have kept him relevant well into the 2020s, and by 2024 he reportedly had a waiting list of roughly 700,000 people hoping for a session. He's also spoken candidly in interviews about how isolating this ability was for him growing up. He's described feeling cut off socially from other kids during middle and high school because of how different his experience was from theirs. And he's talked about growing up in conservative Christian community, where some people saw his gift as something positive, while others viewed it as something much darker. So overall, this is someone with a long, well-documented public career, and someone who has generally been fairly open about the more difficult parts of his life. Given that pattern, does a vague, unconfirmed claim about a secretly evil client from 2017 actually fit with how he's typically talked about at work? Or does it stand out as something unusual? Now, let's look at what the viral video actually claims. It says Tyler had an unsettling reading back in 2017 with someone he allegedly described as one of the most disturbing individuals he's ever encountered professionally, and that he supposedly stayed quiet about the details until now. Here's an important caveat, though. That description comes entirely from a framing of a single video. There's no name attached to the claim, no confirmation from any other source, and no additional outlet reporting on it independently. That doesn't automatically make it untrue, but it does mean it deserves the same careful treatment we'd give any unverified claim. It's also worth pointing out just how common this kind of pattern is in celebrity-focused content generally. A dramatic title gets attached to a thin or vague premise, and from there it gets repeated across other channels until it starts to feel like an established fact. Even though the original source of claim never actually changed or grew, that's not a criticism of anyone who's curious about the story. It's simply how a lot of viral claims tend to spread, which is exactly why it's worth pausing before treating it as confirmed. So is there anything out there that actually backs this story up, or is it built entirely on the framing of one video? Here's where things get genuinely interesting, because Tyler has talked publicly about uncomfortable sessions before, just never in this kind of dramatic, most evil person framing. The most well-documented example of a tense reading is a session with Boy George. The Culture Club frontman reportedly went in openly skeptical, having been convinced by his manager to even show up in the first place. Things apparently got tense enough that the manager, who had been watching from another room, stepped in to encourage his client to be more open to the process. By the end of the session, though, Boy George reportedly softened, later telling cameras that he believed Tyler had a genuine gift and that he'd be open to a follow-up session. So that's a real source example of friction during a reading, but ends with the guest coming around, not with anyone being described as evil or disturbing. There's also the well-known case of his 2016 reading with Matt Lauer on the Today Show. Henry reportedly gave Lauer a deeply personal reading that touched on his late father and maternal grandfather. The timing of that reading looks very different in hindsight. The following year, Lauer was let go from the network following a misconduct complaint, which opened the door to further allegations against him. That's not a case of Tyler describing someone as evil during the actual reading. It's more that the session looked completely different in retrospect once unrelated allegations became public, with fans later pointing out online that nothing in the reading had hinted at what would come out later. So there are genuine source examples of awkward or tense sessions, and even one that aged strangely once unrelated information came out afterward. The real question is whether any of these actually connect to the specific 2017 most evil person claim, or whether that's a completely separate and unverified story being layered on top of a career that already has plenty of real drama attached to it. It's worth zooming out here, because most of what is actually documented about Tyler's career is the opposite of unsettling. It tends to be described by his clients as deeply emotional and often comforting. Snooki has been one of his most enthusiastic repeat clients. During her first session, Henry reportedly passed along messages she said came from her late uncle, which left her in tears, and she was impressed enough to bring him back for a reading involving her entire extended family. A session so emotionally intense that Henry himself reportedly became overwhelmed before it even started, describing a wave of sadness he said didn't feel like his own. Jody Sweean, who has spoken openly about her past struggles with addiction, had a reading in which Henry relayed a message supposedly from her late grandmother expressing pride in her recovery. Sweean later said the moment hit her deeply, given how much support her grandmother had given her during hard years. Then there's Ricky Lake, whose reading became one of the more talked about moments in recent memory. Following the devastating Los Angeles wildfires, Lake shared publicly that Henry had accurately described a fire connected to her months before it happened. It's worth noting, though, that according to coverage of the actual episode, Henry had framed that fire in the past tense during the session and had told Lake directly that he didn't foresee another fire coming when she asked, which makes the online narrative that developed afterward a bit more complicated than the simplified version that circulated. Across his career, the documented pattern really does lean toward tearful, cathartic, repeat client energy. There's also the long-running relationship with the Kardashian family. Henry first read for 3 of the sisters on an episode of their reality show, connecting them with their late father. That session apparently went well enough that other family members later appeared on his own program, and one sister became a recurring client. In a later session, Henry reportedly warned about distance entering a relationship, something fans later connected to a public breakup. It's worth noting that this is exactly the kind of vague but emotionally resonant prediction that critics often point to as a hallmark of cold reading. Specific enough to feel meaningful after the fact, but general enough that it could apply to almost any relationship. Which brings up the question again. If his typical client relationship looks like this, what would it actually take for one specific reading to stand out as uniquely dark or evil? No conversation about Tyler Henry would be complete without mentioning the very vocal group of skeptics who believe the entire practice is fabricated. This is well documented and a real part of his public story, even though it has nothing directly to do with the most evil person claim. Critics have long accused him of using cold reading techniques, offering vague statements designed to resonate emotionally with almost anyone, then letting client fill in the specific details. Some critics have gone further, suggesting that because his subjects are almost always well-known public figures, he or a production team could simply research them ahead of time, a practice sometimes referred to as hot reading. One frequently cited example involves a 2016 reading with a television producer, where Henry referenced an unexpected heart attack and a separate tragedy involving another loved one, and the producer filled in the specifics. His father had died of a heart attack, and his brother had died of an overdose. Critics later pointed out that the family connection involved could have been found fairly easily through a basic search. Henry's own executive producer has pushed back on this kind of accusation directly, stating that Henry is never told in advance who will be reading, and that production deliberately limits how many crew members even know a guest's identity beforehand. Skeptical organizations have weighed in as well. A 2024 opinion piece specifically criticizes Netflix series Live from the Other Side, arguing that the show's format, meeting guests with no visible preparation, actually works against claims of reliability rather than supporting them. A separate, frequently cited critique from years earlier accused Henry of profiting off grief, the idea being that mediums benefit financially from the emotional vulnerability of people who've lost someone. That particular critique has a name attached to it, a well-known skepticism advocate published a formal analysis of Henry's reading with actor Alan Thicke, arguing that flagging heart and blood pressure concerns wasn't a meaningful prediction at all, since heart disease already ranks as the leading cause of death for American men, meaning the odds were already in his favor. It stands out as one of the more organized, on-record challenges to Henry's specific claims, rather than just general online skepticism. Around the same period, an episode of Hollywood Medium featured a physician conducting an on-camera neural scan to observe what was happening in Henry's brain during a session, a rare attempt to test him under something closer to control conditions, though the segment stopped short of settling the debate either way. Even Henry himself has been fairly open that he doesn't consider himself infallible. He's told interviewers that he aims to be accurate roughly 80% of the time, comparing himself to a basketball player who still misses free throws occasionally, but is still recognized as talented overall. He's also said he welcomes skepticism, drawing a distinction between healthy doubt and outright cynicism, and has described the discomfort some people feel around him as a natural reaction to something unfamiliar. There's also been continued skepticism specifically around his Netflix programs, with some online critics accusing the format of profiting from grief and even describing it as predatory toward genuinely vulnerable people. Henry, for his part, has consistently said his intention is to help people, describing his ability almost as a compulsion rather than something he chooses. He said that if he tries to take time off from readings, he starts to feel physically uneasy within a couple of weeks. This matters for the current story because it shows that Henry's career has already weathered plenty of real source controversy, accusations of fraud, accusations of exploiting grief, and no shortage of skeptical commentary from both critics and the very audiences he reads for. None of that, however, lines up specifically with this current evil client narrative. It's a fundamentally different kind of criticism. So given how much documented controversy already surrounds his legitimacy, why would this one unnamed, thinly detailed claim be the one that finally breaks through? Since accuracy sits at the center of every Tyler Henry controversy, it's worth walking through some of the specific, documented cases, because the real track record is messier than either side of the debate usually admits. On the eerily accurate side, there's his reading with skateboarder Rob Dyrdek back in 2016. Dyrdek and his wife were convinced they were expecting a girl, but Henry told him directly that he'd end up being a father figure to a boy, which later turned out to be correct. There's also his reading with comedian Margaret Cho, where he reportedly predicted she'd release a book that would become a hit, even specifying a 2-month delay before its release, something Cho later confirmed happened exactly as described. And there's the case of Alan Thicke, who was told during a reading that heart and blood pressure issues ran in his family. Thicke passed away from an aortic dissection months later, which fans pointed to as proof of Henry's gift. Though skeptics counted that heart disease is statistically the single leading cause of death for American men, making it a fairly safe guess rather than a truly specific prediction. A similar dynamic shows up in his episode with stunt performer Steve-O, who is described in the show's own framing as going in as an outright skeptic and coming out convinced by the session's end. It makes for compelling television, but it's worth flagging the same way as the Boy George episode. It's a documented on-camera reaction, not independently verified proof of accuracy, since we're relying on the show's own framing of how things played out. On the wrong side of the ledger, there's a reading involving Lil' Kim about the Notorious B.I.G., where Henry suggested the rapper had a strong suspicion someone wanted him dead, a detail critics pointed out had already been publicly discussed for years and didn't really add anything new to a long unsolved case. There's also his 2016 comments about the presidential election, where, asked about a candidate's chances, Henry said he wasn't worried, a response vague enough that outlets at the time noted it could be interpreted multiple ways depending on which outcome actually occurred. And then there's Kristen Chenoweth, whose reading has become one of Henry's favorite examples of validation. He reportedly described drawing a specific piece of jewelry before even sitting down with her, and her family later confirmed it matched an actual piece that had belonged to a deceased loved one. Henry himself doesn't claim a perfect record. He said in interviews that getting some readings wrong doesn't invalidate the ones he gets right, comparing it to how even highly skilled athletes have off days without that erasing their overall talent. So a documented track record that's genuinely mixed, some strikingly specific hits, some vague misses, and plenty of room for interpretation between, does a sudden, headline-ready claim about one uniquely evil client become more or less believable? One thing that is well documented is how Tyler talks about discretion when it comes to celebrity clients. In one interview, he explained that when reading someone famous, he has to stay conscious of the fact that they have a public image to protect. Information that might be fine to share out loud for an average person isn't always something a celebrity wants made public. He said directly that he tailors what he shares based on what a client wants kept private. That a real, on-record explanation for why he might stay vague about specific clients or specific sessions. It doesn't confirm anything about a most evil person, but it does help explain why, generally speaking. He wouldn't go into detail naming names or describing a client unfavorably on camera. That's simply been part of how he's described his own process for years, long before this particular claim surfaced online. So if discretion is simply part of how he normally operates, does that make the idea that he stayed quiet for legal reasons more believable? Or does it actually undercut the notion that this one story is uniquely dramatic compared to everything else he's chosen to stay quiet about over the years? Let's be straightforward about the gaps here. There's no verified quote from Tyler using the phrase, most evil person. There's no confirmed identity for who this supposed client was. There's no second source, no entertainment outlet, no separate interview, no social media post from Tyler himself, backing up the claim beyond a single video currently driving the conversation. That matters, because a lot of celebrity gossip content gets built exactly this way. A dramatic title gets attached to a thin or vague premise, and the internet fills in the rest. Sometimes there's a real story underneath. Sometimes there isn't much there at all. Right now, with only one source making a claim and no independent confirmation anywhere, this is firmly in wait-and-see territory rather than confirmed fact. It's also fair to point out that Henry has a long history of being asked directly about difficult or skeptical clients in real interviews, and in every documented case available, his answers stay fairly general. He talks about discretion, about the emotional weight of certain sessions, about clients who initially needed convincing. He doesn't single anyone out as uniquely evil. That doesn't prove the current claim is false, but it does mean it doesn't match the pattern of how he's actually talked about his work in every interview that's actually on the record. So here's where things actually land. Tyler Henry has had real, documented tense moments on camera, plenty of genuine controversy surrounding his legitimacy, a track record that's honestly mixed between hits and misses, and even openly candid about being careful with what he reveals about celebrity clients. But a specific claim about a most evil person from a secret 2017 reading is, at this point, unverified and resting entirely on a single source. That doesn't mean it's necessarily false. It means it hasn't been confirmed, and that distinction matters, especially for a career that already has plenty of real source drama without needing anything invented on top of it.